Welcome back to Road to Wellbeing, the show where we explore the human side of leadership, culture, and workplace wellness. Today's episode is all about one of the most essential and often underestimated skills in modern leadership: emotional intelligence and self awareness. As workplaces become more complex, diverse, and fast paced, the ability to lead with intention, empathy, and clarity is no longer optional. It's foundational. So, joining us today is Lena Thompson, a powerful voice in conscious leadership and transformation. Lena brings deep expertise in helping individuals and organizations uncover blind spots, build emotional intelligence, and lead from a place of alignment and authenticity. In today's conversation, we'll explore how self awareness changes the way leaders show up, how emotional intelligence shapes team culture, what it really takes to create an organization where people and performance can thrive. Let's get into it. So, thank you for joining me today, Lena.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. So let's dive right into it. So my first question for you is kind of what role does emotional and well, actually let's back it up. Can you give us a definition of emotional intelligence? I think online we see a bunch of different things of what it means, a lot of different interpretations, but let's fill the crowd in on, what emotional intelligence is.
Yeah, to me, the way I interpret it is being able to choose your emotional state irrespective of the circumstances. So that no matter what is going on around you, you choose how you feel. And even if you do have that reaction, the reaction is very short, and then momentarily you slip into your chosen state. So to me, that's emotional intelligence.
I love that. It sounds like that sense of awareness, being able to say, okay, yes, this thing might have happened, but I can bring myself right back down. And
Exactly.
it also almost sounds a little bit like I don't want to say like emotional control, but not letting your emotions kind of dictate your actions in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
It's being aware where this action is coming from. I always say the action itself is not important, but where it's coming from, right? Because you can say the same thing. One will be said with like warmth and love or whatever success, and another one will be said from the place of anger or frustration. Same word, same action, very different intention.
hmm And then, of course, very different response from that
Exactly.
perspective as well. Yeah, I love that you bring that up. I think that's something that can be misconstrued a little sometimes because people will say, oh, well, I just wanted to help. But that tone, the intention, the charge behind it can be what kind of shifts how that receiver gets it too.
Definitely.
So, now I'd like to move into the area of leadership. So, what role does emotional intelligence play in effective leadership today, especially as organizations start to prioritize wellness and well being?
Yeah, so firstly, we need to really understand what emotion really means, because emotion is nothing else than energy in motion, right? So the more positive emotions we learn to cultivate, the more energy we start to generate. And I don't mean it's the energy that we get from Red Bull or we get, from even exercise or sleep, because we're so focused on a physical energy, right? Eating right, exercising. That's what I've been doing for many, many years. But we also exist on a mental plane, on emotional, and on spiritual. So when you don't prioritize your emotional intelligence, when you don't really learn how to work with your emotions, you can eat healthy, you can exercise all you like, you can sleep 8, 9 hours a day, but you can still burn out, because even science now shows the connection between our emotional health and our physical health. So emotions is at the core of everything. It dictates our physical health, our mental health, and also just how we show up in life.
I love that you brought in how emotions can also affect physical health. I think that very often it's just grouped into mental health and I think that that kind of loses kind of the importance of emotions. I do think it's kind of minimized, as I kind of said, and that because of that, that there's almost an ignoring of emotions at times. And as you said, as science is starting to show how it affects your physical health, chronic pain can be linked to certain emotions, and depression is also linked to certain physical manifestations. And I think that's why it does become important to have that like emotional intelligence, you know?
Yeah, there's a direct link between suppressed emotions and cancer. And,
Wow.
a lot of, because I've got another business where I work a lot with elderly people or people who have health conditions. And I know that some of them who have gone through cancer, when you really begin to understand, it's the entire life they have been suppressing their voice, their truth, their needs, just trying to fit in, trying to accommodate, trying to please, trying to be who they are not. And that manifested later as illness. And often it's cancer.
Wow. Wow, that's so impactful. Because once again, society teaches us just pack it up, keep it going, keep
Mm,
hustling, keep moving
yeah.
forward.
Think positively, right? Think positively. Inside you are raging, if you're having anger, you're having anxiety, and people telling you to think positively. Well, all you're doing is you're suppressing this emotion, which becomes like a stagnant energy. And if that
Mhm.
energy is not released, it just keeps accumulating, accumulating, and later it can manifest as a full-on rage or a blow up, like in a relationship. What happens when we don't
Mhm.
express our needs, or at work, or manifest as illness, because that energy has to go somewhere. There's only capacity how much we can just store inside, and then it just blows up.
Yeah, that makes me think of some prior experiences I've had and organizations I've worked for previously, where it's like I can notice that kind of like disconnect with some of the people who I was working with. And I could see how their actions would give, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, but their words would be like, oh, I'm supportive. And there was this very weird disconnect between the two. And I think that kind of goes back to that having that like awareness, as you mentioned earlier, when it comes to like emotional intelligence and emotion. So I'd like to touch on that. So how can people start to build that like self-awareness and get started in building that emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so firstly, it's having a lot of self-compassion. Oftentimes when, especially, people who becoming aware of their reactivity, and we all have reactive nature. Reactivity can be obviously shouting. That's what we typically think as reactivity, or like losing a temper. But it also can be pulling back, withdrawing. So that's my natural response. I don't lash out. I completely pull back, and that's a reactive behavior, and that makes other people feel like they've done something wrong. In the meantime, it's obviously my internal process. So without having that awareness, it can be really difficult for people to understand you. So the first thing is to have self-compassion. So if you've noticed yourself being super impatient and you're actually tired, but you can't control that impatience, you notice yourself maybe blowing up at certain people or in certain situation, you're like, why am I always behaving this way? Or maybe you always run away from the problem. The first thing obviously is awareness, to recognize where this pattern keep on repeating, and then having a lot of compassion, because the person who's reacting right now is not you. It's not you, let's say 30, 40, 50, 60-year old, it's the child you. Because all of that has been formed in our youth or in our childhood, most of it between, well, around age of 7, that we took somebody's beliefs, we took somebody's opinions about us, about the world, and we adopted them as our beliefs. And then obviously, we started building this protection mechanism, this coping mechanism, and now they're just playing out. So if, let's say, you were not supported as a child, maybe you had this big dream, like, for example, I wanted to become an astronaut, right? That was my thing when I was about 6 or 7, and I was growing up like in a communist Russia. And my parents thought I was crazy, like, just go to uni, get a degree, whatever, but it's like nobody would go to the moon. So that basically, I mean, a lot of my dreams, what I'm saying, were not nurtured. My parents wanted me to be somebody else. So I felt like something was wrong with me, that who I am as a person, for example, not good enough. So I started carrying those beliefs, adopting them. And if somebody actually even, like, let's say, criticized me or made a little remark, internally I would blow up, doubts, insecurities, and I wanted to like lash out or pull back, whatever that reaction was. But that was me when I was 6, because my parents did not support my dream and did not believe in me. So literally we're like a bunch of 5 and 6-year-olds running around trying to build this world and trying to create this leadership teams without actually having, this awareness of what's going on. So the first step is awareness. And once you've got an awareness, then it's just having a lot of self-compassion. Because if you've been reactive your entire life, you've been feeding that emotion for 30, 40 years with all your energy, it's not an overnight task to take the energy out of it and change it. So even that, just giving yourself compassion is great. And then obviously observing the situations and choosing to behave differently. But I would say awareness and self-compassion is the key to really start changing any emotional behavior.
I love the heightening of the self-compassion and like really driving that home, because I do think that and I also love that you brought up the whole we're all just like big kids running around and we're all just our 7-year-old selves trying to figure it out as we go along, because I don't think many of us realize just how impactful those experiences of our childhood may have been, and something that may have happened to you at 5 years old, that when you think about it now, you're like, yeah, that was no big deal. But 5-year-old you is angry. And it feels like no big deal to you as an adult because you've been, as you said, feeding that same pathway for your entire life at this point. And when it comes to self-compassion, I think that's a key factor that sometimes is missing because we're so hard on ourselves, which feeds back into whatever that story was from when we were children. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I really am too emotional, or maybe I really am like a crybaby. That was one of the things I got when I was a child because I was like really in tune with my emotions. And I think that that's so interesting because, as you said, it does come up in the workspace. So when you're giving maybe a presentation, and if you weren't heard when you were a child and you feel like you're not being listened to in the workspace, that same reaction comes up. And you mentioned that one of the key steps is to pay attention to those experiences and choose a different kind of reaction in the moment. So, what are some steps that people can take? Kind of, they're in that moment, it's the heat of it, they're about to react. What can they do to make sure that they, react differently this time?
Yeah, so actually, I just want to for a moment go back to that, little children running around and make a really important point because it took me years to really get to that stage. And basically is when we criticize ourselves, all we are doing is we're becoming that critical parent, the critical teacher, that when we were younger, we needed their love, we needed their support, we needed their acceptance, and we didn't get that. And now we're doing the same thing to ourselves. And that's why without having this awareness, without compassion, you can meditate, you can do breath work, you can journal, you can go purple in the face, but nothing will shift because all you're doing is you're creating more of that resistance. You're basically saying that who I am is not okay. And you can't hold that energy of leadership, of true, authentic leadership and self-loathing at the same time. It's just not possible. So I just wanted to point out because people will say, well, if let's say I don't know, I behave terribly or shouted, I feel terrible, like I've done it again. Even with our children, right? Sometimes like and then you beat yourself up rather than going, you know what? I'm actually trying to parent me because the way I was parented, I didn't get that love and nurture and support. And it's okay that I shouted at my daughter right now. I'm still going to love me. And next time I will choose differently. Next time, maybe I will look at it from a different perspective, from her perspective. And even if I shouted it again, I'm going to apologize later. I'm going to take accountability. And this is the big thing, going back to your question, is taking accountability for all your emotional triggers. That is probably, after having that awareness and compassion, understanding that emotion you felt came from you. The thoughts that you had about this experience came from you. So if they came from you, then I think it's quite logical to conclude that you are creator of your thoughts and your emotions, and therefore you're the only one who's responsible, not that person over there, right? They were just the trigger. They just pushed the button, and something that you haven't healed, haven't looked within yourself, they just got triggered. They just got activated. And how often does that happen? And then we start talking about the narcissistic environment, toxic people. All they're doing, they're just living out their traumas and triggering us. There's nothing narcissistic about them. They just have traumas they haven't healed. So I don't know if I've answered that question. Was that clear, or is it something? Yeah. So
No, yeah, you totally got it.
Accountability is a big thing. right? It's like this person made me feel angry. Well, firstly, this person just pushed the trigger. This person is a messenger for what I have not yet healed. So thank you, the messenger. Let's not shoot the messenger and let them go, and then take accountability. Okay, great. Where else in my life am I reacting like this? Maybe I got angry with my partner. Maybe I got angry within a traffic jam. Maybe I got angry there. Oh, hang on a second. All of a sudden, I'm the common denominator, right? And it's bringing it back to you. And the reason why it's powerful is because we stop being the victim of our circumstances, because we become accountable. Therefore, the only thing that needs to change is us. We don't need to start fixing everybody around us. And I think it becomes a little bit easier to manage then.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that call to accountability. And I do think that that has been one of the biggest tools, at least for myself, as I've been working on my own emotional intelligence, is saying, like, while yes, this traffic jam may have upset me, but what it really is inside of me is maybe I'm impatient, and maybe I feel impatient because I'm on the way to a meeting or to meet up with friends, and I don't want them to think XYZ about me. And it's really easy to take it and say, all these people around me are just driving so slow. Living in an inner city is terrible. Where it doesn't matter if I'm in New York, LA, Houston, Baltimore, traffic is going to be traffic. And it's all my reaction to it. I think that's so powerful. And I love how you mentioned that that trigger is just the messenger. Because I do think also we can get very caught up on this person made me mad and almost demonizing that person. Because sometimes it can be a little easier to demonize the messenger than to take the look at yourself and say, okay, why was I triggered, or what was it that triggered me about this situation? So I think that right there was so powerful. Listeners, I hope that you all take that home.
Yeah, and it's actually great to even have those people who trigger you, bring them more into your life. And you know what becomes really powerful is when you start taking accountability, when you get triggered. And I'm not saying go hang out with them all the time, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes it's nice to go back in a den with a lion and to see how much you have grown. So when you walk into this situation and when you see that the person who used to trigger you so much has no power over you anymore, where you just have no emotional reaction, to me, that's freedom. That's the true source of freedom, not the shoes, not the bags, not the holiday. That ability just to hold yourself steady and calm in any situation, you know. And the point really of emotional intelligence is never not to react, because we are humans. Of course, things are going to wind us up, but the question is, how long do we react for? Can we shorten that reaction into maybe minutes or even seconds, rather than going for days and weeks and years sometimes, right?
Mhm. I love that. So I was going to ask the question about like common blind spots in leaders, but I think you kind of touched on it a little bit with the, it's just the knowing yourself and knowing what those triggers are. But is there anything you'd also like to add on as to what are some like common blind spots in leaders that emotional intelligence can truly support with?
Yes, I mean, emotions is just part of the process. So you can become super aware of it. But as a society, and I think we spoke about it earlier, is we often told to numb them, to run away from them, not to express them, because it makes us weak. It makes us, not strong enough. So we end up suppressing it. But in order to heal, you have to feel, right? And we all have a lot of healing work to do. I don't care how amazing your childhood was, but when the level of experience is a greater than the level of your consciousness, you will have trauma. That is an example. I love using example. It's so simple. Let's say you're 3 years old, you're sitting in a pram, you drop your ice cream and your mom doesn't pick it up for whatever reason. And you just make an assumption, she doesn't love me or she doesn't care. And you can actually carry that with you for the rest of your life, right? So it's really important then to allow yourself to feel it. If you feel that anger, then go and feel it. Sit with that anger. Allow, again, the emotion is energy in motion, and the only way out of this emotion is through. So it literally needs to move through your body. So when I do like workshops and there's quite a few exercises I do, with clients. I don't do the sitting with emotions because it can get quite intense. But that's the only way I believe that we can literally shed all of this layers of conditioning and programming and get in touch with our true self by feeling it, by feeling, being raw with them, letting it all out. Usually it's through tears. Sometimes it can even be like a more physical reaction, like vomit, whatever that is, right? It's the body just moving energy, but that's the only way.
Feel the feels. I think that's like the
Feel to heal.
feel to heal. I love that. And
Mm.
that I love that full circle that goes back to how we kicked off the episode to say, we're so taught to just kind of ignore it, push it down, pretend it doesn't happen, or numb it with food, substances, going out, movies, TV. There's so many things to distract us now that I think it's almost like a superpower being able to like actually feel what it is that you need to feel.
Yeah.
Um,
And sometimes I appreciate, you can be, let's say, in environments where you don't have a space to feel, right? You're
mhm.
super triggered and you don't have time to go into the whole feeling thing. So what I would then suggest is just take a few deep breaths. You can even, like, breath is so incredible because all it does, it just resets your nervous system. It's completely free. It's available to all of us. We just
Mhm.
forget that we can actually breathe. So even like breathing in, like on a count of, let's say, 3, and then you hold for counts of 4 and you breathe out on 5. So you go 3, 4, 5, and that already kind of calms your nervous system down. And when your nervous system is calm, you will make probably a different choice to when you completely triggers. So even I have that. And then obviously, if somebody wants to go deeper into the work and really start working in the emotions, then you can go home, recreate the experience, feel the anger, whatever that's coming out for you, and really properly sit and be with us. But breath is always like a quick kind of fix. But again, like I always say to my clients, it's like, let's say you have a broken leg and you take a paracetamol, right? The leg still needs to be mended. So that's what I mean. Breath is great, but you still need to go through the other process.
So I love that tool because you are right. We do forget that we can use the breath to shift our mindsets, shift our emotions, and also get that energy moving. That's another method to get it moving and out there. And it's funny because even as like a yoga instructor myself, I find myself not doing it sometimes. And I'll have to say, okay, remember to breathe, like breathe. And I love that it's something that's, I don't want to say so small, but yeah, so small yet so powerful and impactful. And you're right, you can do it anytime, whether you're in a meeting, in a car, if you're with family over like the holidays and you're feeling a little stressed out. That's that one little like subtle key thing that we can do. Um, so my next question is, what can it look like when a leader is like truly aligned with their values and shows that emotional intelligence? And how can that influence the workplace?
So leaders who are completely in alignment with their emotions and with their purpose, you can feel that authenticity from them. They literally, they don't. I'm just trying to find the right words because, to be honest, in my 20 years of corporate career, I haven't come across people like that. I have met them on my journey, over the last 6 years. And these are the people, it's like you want to just stand next to them. It's like you walk into the room and there's a whole bunch of people, but there's one person like pulls you in and you just want to go and be in the energy. Because again, like what we said, emotion is energy in motion. And when you're so aligned, the energy you radiate is a very like welcoming and nurturing. So there can be complete chaos happening in a room, people shouting, people talking, whatever. But as that one person just stands out. And that's the kind of person that people will gravitate to. They don't need to shout orders. They don't need to tell you what to do. It's just their presence, because our energy speaks louder than our words. And that presence is just enough. And I've been to events, I'll never forget, with Dr. Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza? So I've done several of his events. And I remember my first event, that's how I got into this whole personal development. I literally bump into him, like, and he just
Like
smiled.
physically bumped into him. That's so cool.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's like, no, don't worry. And just like, he like smiled and we had a couple of words. But I will never, I mean, even back then, like I didn't kind of get the whole concept of energy and all of that. I mean, like energy is energy, right? And I will never forget the feeling just that like momentarily, it's like, I was like, wow, what was that kind of thing? I mean, he's the next level, right? Because this guy is just, I mean, I've done a lot of his events. I was fortunate enough to volunteer at some of his events. But, it's something I aspire that level to get to. It's like literally when your energy is enough. That's it.
Yeah.
No words are needed.
That's so cool. One, the Joe Dispenza callback, because I have been reading his book, that's Becoming Supernatural, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. So I've been working through that one, and I find I'll read it and then I'll have to stop because it's just so, I don't know, so impactful, so overwhelming because the concept sounds so simple, but at the same time, it's so transformational. So thank you for sharing that. And then I do love that callback to the authenticity. When you're authentic, when you're aligned, people can feel it. And you don't have to play the role. You don't have to over assert yourself. You don't have to do all of those things. You can kind of just be, and the people will feel it and will gravitate. And I can only imagine what that would do in a workplace if you're just like, hey,
Yeah.
your
You just
leadership's
beacon
just,
of light, right? You just sit
yeah.
there and you can just help people to uplift themselves just with your presence. There's
Mhm.
nothing you need to do. You just literally got to be who you are. And I mean, as I said, I've come across people like that on my journey, but never in a workplace. But I do believe they exist, or maybe it's the new generation of the leaders, but that comes only through releasing your baggage. We all carry baggage, like what we were saying earlier, like I'm so stressed, I'm so this, I want to be supportive. It's a complete disconnect because often there's a misalignment between who we are, who versus who we truly are, versus who we think we are. There's a big difference.
Mm.
So by working through your emotions, releasing the baggage, rewiring your mind, because we haven't even touched on thoughts, that's another big component. You can actually bring those two aspects together, and that's where authenticity is born, I believe.
I love this. I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation just on like that connection of like thoughts and emotions and that like behavior wheel where like your thoughts lead to your emotions lead to your actions then reinforce your thoughts about yourself. And it's that like cycle. So I would love to invite you back for that,
Oh,
Lena. Uh,
yeah.
but before we disconnect, I would like to say, what's one piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners based on our conversation today? You've dropped a lot of gems, though, so if there's anything additional.
Yeah, one thing is just take time to integrate. We are so busy learning. We think that knowledge is power, but knowledge isn't really power unless it's actually embodied, integrated into every cell of our bodies. Because often it's like riding a bicycle. You can read about riding a bicycle, but unless you've been on it, you've experienced it, it's just information. And I mean, I go to a lot of conferences, I speak at events and conferences, and I see, I speak to so many people, and they're like, oh, I went to this event, and this conference, like, I'm so tired. And I'm like, but why are you doing it? And like, because I want to learn. I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you remember from 5 conferences ago. Actually, from even 2. I don't know. We're just so busy trying to learn things, even trying to learn about leadership, trying to learn about emotions. And I had a few calls with clients. They're like, I've read all the book about emotions. I watched so many videos. I'm like, but nothing is going to shift. You can get your knowledge, but remember, this is only 5% of your potential, 3 to 5%, because you're getting your knowledge into your conscious minds. 95% of you is subconscious, and it's literally running and maybe even ruining your life. So in order to fully really step into that knowledge, you've got to take time to integrate it. So my suggestion is whatever your interest is, whatever your purpose, whatever your calling you have, your passions, don't just run around trying to read them and get more information, but really sit with them, integrate them, because that's where you can really start making changes.
I love that, Lena. And I am taking that to heart too. I think that was a message for me personally as well. So I'd love to thank you for joining us today. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in too. And catch us for the next episode of Road to Wellbeing.
Thank you.